two, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We are sorry that we are running behind our schedule today, but just give us about 5 minutes. We should get starting. Okay? Just give us about 5 minutes. We should get starting. We just want to make sure the panelist arrangement is done shortly. Sorry, I think the mic wasn't working. It's on now. Yeah, the mic wasn't working. Good morning again. Thank you for coming, and thank you for coming for this conference. We want to acknowledge everyone that has come. And as I said, we are running behind schedule, but we promise to start shortly, I think within the first 5 minutes. So we want to thank those who are joining us online, yeah, through the various social media platforms. That's the YouTube, the Facebook, and as well as now the the other Zoom accounts that we have hosted for this conference. So just give us a few minutes as we address the aspect of the panelist. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll get starting. I'm told everything is okay. Welcome again. Thank you everyone for coming here today for this conference. I'll want to say that it has been a privilege for me to be given this task as your MC today. My name is Helen Osiolo. I'm a lecturer at the Strathmore University, as well as now being a specific lecturer within the Strathmore Institute of Mathematical Sciences. Good morning once again. Good morning, everyone. So we want to thank those who are joining us physically here through the SBS auditorium. And we also want to thank those who are joining us online. We have various platforms that we have organized for everyone to join and participate through online. So we have various channels, that is the YouTube, the Facebook, and the Zoom account, okay? So I also want to recognize people who are joining us physically today. And one of them is the Strathmore University, our own VC Chancellor Designate, Dr. Vincent Ogutu. We also wish to recognize our former Vice Chancellor, Professor John Othiambo. We also wish to recognize our DVC who is here, Academics Affairs, that is Dr. Elizabeth Gashenga, sorry. And also as well as
Thank you so much. Till now we can actually proceed. So let me just welcome you once again. Good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for coming today in this morning. It has been very cold, but you are here with us, which is very nice. So just to say something small about the mathematics conference, this is our 6th mathematics conference. We have been holding this conference every 2 years since 2010. So this is our 6th mathematics conference. And the aim of this mathematics conference really has been to bring about researchers together and exchange of ideas. And this is something that is so important that has helped really a lot the mathematics community. And in fact, one of the beneficiaries of this conference really has been the Institute of Mathematical Sciences itself. Some of the lecturers who are here have benefited a lot from this, but also not just here, but even other universities have really benefited a lot from this conference in promoting these collaborations that we have really had in supporting the graduate students, their work. And as you know that we are really facing the global pandemic, so it has not been possible to have our conference the normal way, which is physical. And so this is why we actually decided to have this conference in hybrid format. So some people will be here, some will be online, but feel free really to participate in whichever way that is possible. So then therefore, without too much ado, my job is really to invite the Vice Chancellor Designate, Dr. Vincent Ogutu, to actually open the conference. Let's give him a hand. Dr. Vincent Ogutu.
Our chief guest for today, Professor Bernard Manderic, our mathematician-in-chief in Strathmore, Professor John Odhiambo, our eminent panelists, distinguished professors, faculty, students, and conference attendees, both here physically at Strathmore, and those of you who are following us online on YouTube, on Facebook, on Zoom. A very big welcome to our mathematical conference here today. I'll be honest with you, it's my first time ever to attend a mathematical conference. And I must say it's a pleasure already, just from the interactions I've had during the preparation to the conference, speaking with Dr. Mary Achieng, and just now chatting with our distinguished guest, our guest of honor. It's really something that I see myself doing over and over again in future. We were looking at how these mathematical conferences began and what the objective was, and how one after the other, the objectives are being met. It was always meant to be a developmental thing for our faculty and students, and people are learning a lot through these conferences. They're meeting their future supervisors. There's also a lot of collaboration going on where people realize that there's a connection between what they're doing and what somebody else in another part of the world, in a different branch of mathematics, or even just a different field of knowledge is doing. And then these connections happen. So we're very happy that all of that is happening as well. In my case, I tend to attend more of management, organizational psychology conferences. And even there, it's just great how you manage to meet people at conferences. It's always a reunion. It's an occasion to meet old friends, people who mentored you, people you mentored, and just make new friends. It's always a wonderful opportunity to do that. And then it's also a chance to get stimulated. Because when you ask yourself, what is the cutting edge? Is the cutting edge the latest publication that's just been released, June 2021? No, it's not. That is not the latest research. The latest cutting edge research is what is being presented in conferences, in brown bags, just incipient ideas being tested at a conference level that have at least passed that initial test of peer review. And people say, we think you're onto something. Let's hear more from you and let's get some reaction from you. So conferences are a wonderful opportunity to catch up and to know what the cutting edge is, what is the emerging thinking in our field. And we are living in very exciting times. So these are times when there's high-speed computing, which wasn't possible in the past, at least not for everyone. I remember visiting a computer museum in San Francisco. So they showed you all the different types of computers that we have seen evolving. And I was particularly interested in seeing a Cray, because from being a young person reading novels, especially science fiction novels, I was always intrigued by the Cray and its computational ability. And for some reason, the tour guide couldn't remember where it was. So we moved on to a different part of the museum and we were being given a talk. And at one point he came to me and said, I've found it, come follow me. So I abandoned the talk. I followed him almost as if to worship, because I'd always wanted to see a Cray. And I dreamt about it. I mean, it was like 20 years since I'd heard about a Cray. And so when I saw it, I was in awe at this machine that made it possible to do so many things, from the 60s, 70s. And to think that now you can do it just, some of those things on your smartphone, on your laptop, it's just mind-boggling. But the beauty of it all is the opportunity it gives us to make calculations we couldn't do before, for ordinary researchers to attempt to solve certain magnitudes of problems that they could not solve before, just because of that computational ability. They're very, very exciting times. And it then means that everyone gets connected with computing and with mathematics, because if you ask yourself, where did computing come from? The ability to compute, even just going back to the binary, 0-1 thing. That's mathematics. And when you ask yourself, why are mathematicians so proud? And, I'm not insulting our chief mathematician and all the other mathematicians here. I think you do have a reason to be proud, because mathematics is at the foundation of so many things. You might even claim it's at the foundation of knowledge, because at some point you come to the realization that you know or you don't know. It's binary, it's 0 or 1, and then you start building from that. And I was just speaking with Professor Mandarik, and he is a multidisciplinarian. So he studied mathematics, of course, he studied computer science, he studied engineering, but he's also studied philosophy of science, which examines how we know, what we can know, all those dynamics. And it comes down to mathematics. Do you know or don't you know? Is this A or B? Is this 1 or 0? Are these two the same or they're different? Is it the same concept? It's all mathematical. So everyone's going to talk with mathematics at some point. And that is one of the things that attracts me to this conference, that it is so multidisciplinary. We were discussing again with Dr. Mary Ocheng about qualitative research and how tedious it can be to code. And we were wondering, since today we're learning about machine learning, is there some insight it could shed on coding? Because coders are following some sort of system. Could it be either taught by telling the computer exactly what to do, you program it? Or could we set things up such that through machine learning, computers learn to code, qualitative research type coding? And I put this as a challenge to Professor Mandarik, and he was already beginning to show me the building blocks of how that could be done. amazing possibilities. So we're looking at data science coming up front and center, and mathematics is going to be at the heart of that. And everyone is going to use data science. We're going to use it in agribusiness. Our very own Professor Diambo is using it in healthcare management. There's all sorts of applications of data science. And again, that places mathematics at the center of this multidisciplinary conversation. Personally, I'm in the field of organizational behavior, organizational psychology. I had to use different methods for my research, so both qualitative and quantitative. And you'll never guess who taught me qualitative research. It was actually a mathematician. Go figure. You normally think of mathematicians as the exact opposite of somebody doing qualitative research. And so when the professor who taught me qualitative research in my doctorate, Professor Arthur Powell, when he introduced himself and he said he was a mathematician, we were at first taken aback. And there are many specializations in mathematics, and he's the only person I've met in that particular field he comes from, which is called ethnomathematics. So he looks at how numbers and computation are represented in different languages and in different cultures. And so he goes into ethnomathematics, which is deeply qualitative, but he's also a mathematician. So he was in the perfect position to teach us how to quantify some of the things that we were looking at that seemed totally qualitative, so that we could then make inferences. Again, another demonstration of how mathematics connects with everything. So as we begin this conference, I challenge all of you to embrace that multidisciplinary culture, even just the multicultural way of living. Professor Mandarik, who's going to speak to us, he epitomizes that. So for instance, I've told you he's in philosophy, in mathematics, and computer science, but he's also multicultural. He's visited and helped several universities in Kenya, so much so that people have given him Kenyan names. So closer to my place, you know, he is known as Opio Dongo. And in some parts of Kenya, he's known as Kipkemboi. And he's also known as Ndegwa. That is being multicultural. It is reaching out to others, trying to cross that divide. And he's multidisciplinary. So I invite you to get out of whatever shells you're in, whatever silos you're in, reach out across the divide. This is a conference. There are several tracks. Don't just stick to your track. Experiment, venture into one of the other tracks. Remember, this is the cutting edge. You really do want to know what's happening out there, and you never know who you're going to meet, what connections are going to be made. So I invite all of you to do that. And especially for the doctoral students and for the master's students who are here, and just anyone who's aspiring to do research, look out for these who's who that you've been reading about and citing. They're in this conference. Reach out to them, make friends with them. You never know how far it'll go. I remember getting my external supervisor at an Academy of Management conference, meeting her twice, and then eventually proposing if she could be on my committee, and she agreed. Those kinds of connections happen in places like this. So for those of you who are students, I really, really urge you to make the most of the connections and networking that can be done over here, and then to let yourself be inspired, because conferences also raise the bar for you. You thought you were doing research. You thought you're doing it at a certain standard. And then you meet somebody who's thinking so far above anything you've ever done in your field, and you realize that's the bar. That's the cutting edge. That's the cutting edge. That's the standard. That's where I need to go to. So set yourself a standard by attending these sessions and by interacting with people. And so it is my great pleasure to declare the 6th Strathmore Mathematical Conference officially open, and to hand back to the MC to give us a nice technical analysis of what Professor is going to tell us, and to welcome him to give us the keynote today. So the conference is officially open. Do enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, our VC designate, Victor. Thank you so much. Can we appreciate him, please? Those joining us online, you can also appreciate him. You can react, you can do a thumbs up, you can clap for those joining us online. For those joining us through this physical meeting, please, can we give him a better clap? Thank you, thank you. For those following us online, we wish to remind you that you can post your questions, you can post your comments over to the chat applications. Please feel free, but remember we'll have a Q&A session, that is the question and answer session after the plenary session, okay? So next in program, I think we will have to invite our Professor Mandarik, University of Brussels, to come and present to us the topic for today, which is more relevant in terms of Bayesian inference and decision-making for A and B testing. But before I do that, I wish to actually give a brief profile about Professor Mandarik. I am so sure that I won't do a very good job as it has been done by our own Dr. Ogutu, who has done a very good job in explaining his profile, but I will just do it formally so that we can also follow from this bio. So I will say that Professor Bernard Mandarik is a professor at the Department of Computer Science and a member of the AI, that is the artificial lab of the V, I think I'm spelling it correctly, the V University in Belgium. He is also a promoter of over 25 research projects. I looked at this and I was overwhelmed at how he has done a very good job in terms of collaboration and research. He is also a co-author of several publications. I was amazed also that he has done about 200 papers so far and counting. He holds a PhD in artificial intelligence, as it was said, a master's in philosophy, and another master's also in mathematics. What a combination. His teaching focus is based on his research domain, that is the artificial intelligence in general and machine learning in particular. So let's appreciate Professor Mandarik for taking up this important role. From his profile, we are comfortable that he will deliver. Is that so? Please let us appreciate him once more as he walks into the podium.
Thank you for the nice introduction, especially from the VC. Today, I want to talk about Bayesian machine learning. I have changed the title a little bit. I want to talk about Bayesian machine learning and yeah, okay. So then where is it here? Are the okay. Now I have to go here. View full screen. Now we should be able to see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So today I wanted to talk about Bayesian machine learning, and I'll introduce it using a very simple example, which is called A/B testing, which is a bit of a stupid name. You have two alternatives and you want to find out which one of them is the best based on some data that you have. Okay, many people are doing this. Of course, hypothesis testing and statistics is an example, but for instance, also online newspapers. If there's breaking news and they want to put a headline on it, then at the beginning, some people will see one headline, A, other people will see another headline, B, and then they try to figure out as soon as possible which one of the two attracts most attention. Yeah. So it's a basic, simple example, but you meet it in practice a lot. Okay, as mentioned already by the VC, I'm from the Artificial Intelligence Lab at the University of Brussels. For us, Belgium is a very small country, but a very complicated country. So we are 30,000 square kilometers, but we have 3 official languages. And in Brussels, you have 2 free universities, one in French and one in Dutch. I'm from the Dutch speaking. And you can also see the web address of the AI lab. You can take a look at this because we are quite big. We are like 6 professors, maybe 10 postdocs, 40, 50 people in total. And as far as we can track the history, we are like one of the oldest AI labs on the European continent. We're already, of course, in the United States and also in the UK. But as far as we know, we are the oldest on the European continent. The founder who had to retire, because in Belgium you have to retire at 65. You can finish the academic year where you are 65. This year I have to retire, so that's why I've mentioned my Gmail address. I have 3 more months to go. The founder of the lab did his PhD at MIT, which is like the place where AI started. Yeah, so this is a little bit of the history. And I don't know how to switch here. It's like this is fixed. The slides, where are they? Yeah. So the slides were here. Pardon me? And we are hidden behind here. Okay, so if I go here, that's what I see. So this should be the slides, yeah? This only one. Or maybe can I share the whole screen? On the slides, yeah. No, but then if yeah. Yeah. So then I'll try it this way. And then where are my slides? Yeah. So I hope also the audience online can see the slides. So it will be, my talk will consist of 3 parts. First one is machine learning. Before I can explain why Bayesian machine learning is a good thing to do, I should briefly explain what is machine learning. Then we will talk about Bayesian machine learning and how it differs from standard machine learning. And that will be illustrated the A/B testing example. And then part 3 is like is like to go over to the panel discussion, which will be about what is important as expertise. And I will give here a few hints about my expertise in machine learning. So what do you need to do it very well? And according to my view, but not everyone agrees, is you have to have a very good background in mathematics. But some other people say, because you have all these tools, you use the tools, but if you're using a tool that you don't understand, you can do very stupid things. Yeah. So the outline of the talk is, okay, what is machine learning? Then I will talk about Bayesian machine learning and why is it important? Why is it a good thing to do? Well, one of the important things is that you can quantify your uncertainty. So you have many machine learning algorithms that are making a decision. For instance, it sees a handwritten character and it says it's an 8. Yeah, but you have no idea if that algorithm is certain about its decision or not. And maybe nowadays also in Kenya, you have heard about bias in machine learning. Okay, one famous example was that pictures of Black women were not recognized. They were talking about bias. Well, I'm almost sure that one of the reasons is because the algorithms used had no notion about uncertainty. Because if you're very uncertain, you should not make a decision. Yeah. Then another thing is that a common problem in machine learning is overfitting. Because data, you have data, but you have also noise. And if you learn too much noise, then you also capture the noise and things are going badly. Yeah, and so it's a major problem in standard machine learning to handle overfitting. And one of the interesting things of Bayesian machine learning is that it's done automatically. Yeah. Moreover, you can have more than one model which is capable of explaining the data, and then how at the end can you make a selection between all these models, or maybe you can combine them into an even better model. And this can also be done in a very good way, in a principled way in BML. And then finally, I mean, there's something which is often forgotten, but a user of machine learning is not really interested in the predictions of a algorithm, because you as a user, you want to make a decision. Yeah. For instance, if I have an algorithm that can predict very well the incidence of malaria in different parts, well, for the decision makers, that's not that important. They want to know what they could do given your information. So they have to do decision making, and you have Bayesian decision theory, which is something which even comes out of economics. And you can combine machine learning with Bayesian decision theory so that people can also make decisions based on the predictions done by the models. Yeah. And then the last part is about skills for machine learning. And we will continue on that during the panel discussion. And I will briefly talk a little bit about mathematical skills, what you need about mathematics to do machine learning. And basically, it's almost everything. Almost everything you have seen in mathematics, you can use in machine learning. Even areas of mathematics like topology, you might think, topology and machine learning. Well, there is something called topological machine learning. And for those people that have heard of Morse theory and topology, you can apply it in machine learning. Yeah. I'll also talk briefly about computer science skills. And actually, it's not that difficult because I am sure that many mathematicians know already some kind of mathematical programming language. But apart from that, you also need some extra skills because you can also do very bad programming if you're not very careful. And if you look at programs of engineers, they are often examples of bad mathematical programming, in the sense that they are hard to read, they are hard to maintain, etc., etc. And then one thing which nowadays it seems like we forget even at universities, one of the most important skills is that people have to be able to write good reports. Yeah. And so this is also important. Now, as you have noticed already, I am using the word machine learning because this is a major area in artificial intelligence. That's because of my background, but other people are using data science. You also have computational statistics, big data, data mining, and economics. They are talking about predictive analytics or business intelligence. So these are all areas which have a huge overlap. Yeah. So now I will talk about machine learning, and I will use a very simple example. I mean, you are going to a bank, you're a customer, and you would like to have a credit card, and then the bank has to decide whether you get it. And if you are lucky and you're getting one, then the bank has to decide what is your limit, how much you can spend on your credit card. And these are two examples of what is called supervised learning. And one is called classification. So either you get a credit card or you don't get a credit card. And the second is an example of regression. So when you get the credit card, then the decision had to be made, what is your limit? Yeah. And the bank has a lot of information about customers. I mean, you know the age, you know the current salary, the kind of job they have, permanent or not, years in job, etc. And these are called features. And now, when is it possible to apply machine learning? Well, first of all, there must be some pattern in the data. If there's no pattern in the data, then there's nothing to learn. Yeah. So if you watch TV and there is nothing, and your antenna is not working, then you see noise on TV. There is no pattern over there. Yeah. The second thing is that, and don't be scared now, mathematicians, that you cannot model it mathematically. I'll explain that later. And then the most important part is you must have data. If you have no data, then you cannot apply machine learning. Yeah. Now, the first two items, I mean, you can live with it, because if there is no pattern in your data and you apply machine learning and you will do it well, then you will discover there is no pattern to learn. If you do it badly, then you find some spurious pattern, and which is maybe worse than realizing there is no pattern. What do I mean by model mathematically? Well, sometimes if you have lots of data, but you have good mathematical models, then you cannot beat these models by using machine learning. And a typical example is physics. I mean, people had, for centuries, they had lots of data about planets revolving around the Earth. And, but now we have good physical theories. And these theories, they are much more compact, much more concise than what a machine learning algorithm would discover. Okay, here we have physical models that can explain the data. Yeah. But again, you can try and apply machine learning and you will get some results, but maybe it will not be as good as, okay, for sure, it will not be as good as models that can give explanations. Okay. Now, what is the basic premise which is underlying machine learning? Well, you have lots of observations of data, and you try to discover the underlying process that has generated these data. And you have many variations, but this is the basic idea about everything behind data science, machine learning, etc. And then you have a number of different types of learning. They are called supervised learning, and I will focus to that. And in the case of supervised learning, you have annotated data. So for instance, I have lots of handwritten digits, and someone has indicated that these are the zeros, these are the ones, etc. So I do know the correct answer. Yeah? And in a sense, this is the easiest way to do machine learning. At the other extreme, you have unsupervised learning. And I will not talk about that. And then in between, you have reinforcement learning, which usually is not used in data science, but which is a really important part of artificial intelligence, especially robotics, because there you try to learn by trial and error. Yeah, so you get some feedback, but the only feedback you get is it's good or bad. You get some kind of reward. Yeah. And we humans are very good at it. That's how we learned our first language, because nobody explained us what is the meaning of a word, because we didn't know the language. It's also the way that we have learned to bike. It's the way we have learned to walk, etc., etc. Yeah. But in the context of the Internet of Things, I'm sure that reinforcement learning will also play a role in data science. For instance, if a thermostat is connected to the internet, yeah, then you don't know what is now the correct temperature or not. But if people are not happy, they will increase or decrease, yeah, and that's some kind of reinforcement signal. And so reinforcement learning will also play a role in data science I'm sure about that, especially in the context of the Internet of Things. Maybe I should skip a little bit of the formalities here. So what we tried to do here, our first example was okay, we have to decide whether someone gets a credit card or not. And we have inputs. So one X will stand for one customer. And for instance, me, I go to a bank over here and they have information about me. So I'm X number 1. And then what the machine learning algorithm will try to do is it will try to discover weights for each of the features. So X1, etc. They are features. For instance, my age, my income, my job. Yeah. And then the learning algorithm tries to learn the weights. So these are the W's. Yeah. So and once we have determined the W's, then a credit card will be approved if the weighted sum is above some threshold theta, and also the threshold we have to learn. Otherwise, it's below the threshold, then the bank will deny a credit card to me. Okay, and then basically any of the hypotheses that we have in our model can be written as, okay, the last line over there is that you take the inner product of the weight factor, and that's what you have to learn, the components of the weight factor. You take the inner product of the weight factor with the data point on which you want to make a decision, and you look at the sign of the inner product. Yeah. And what the learning algorithm has to do is it has to figure out, based on the training set, what are good values of the W's, and usually we use the term weight factor for what we want to learn. Yeah. And here we have a very simple example. So you have one data point, and this can be seen as a point in a how-dimensional space. So we have a vector which is corresponding with one potential customer. And then we have the current weight factor, which is shown in red. Yeah. And this is the current hypothesis. Yeah? This is what I will use to do a classification. Yeah. Now, if you look at this picture over here, what will be the decision for the current weight factor and the current customer X? Well, we look at the inner product, and okay, what you can see from the figure is that the inner product is here. The sign is negative because they are not pointing in the same direction. Yeah. So in this case, the current hypothesis will misclassify the point X, because we know that the correct answer Y equals +1, it should have been a positive example. And the algorithm is misclassifying it. And what will happen in the learning algorithm, that it will update the current weight factor, which is in red, by adding the scalar product of Y with the vector X. And this is the new weight factor, which will then be used. And this process is continued until every example in the training set is explained well. And then you're finished learning. And from that moment on, that hypothesis will be used in practice. This is a very simple machine learning algorithm, which is called the perceptron learning algorithm. Now, maybe many among you think machine learning is something very new. So anyone has a guess how old this algorithm is? Yeah, 60 years. By the way, it's also something that people are surprised of. Artificial intelligence is the second oldest area in computer science. It's only numerical computation which is older. Yeah, and machine learning was one of the oldest areas in artificial intelligence. But after a few years, they stopped, and the main reason was because in these days they didn't have the computational power to do these experiments. And by the way, that's one of the main reasons why now we have a survival of machine learning, a revival of machine learning, because nowadays, only nowadays, we have the power needed to do the computation. And I don't know if you have heard of Moore's law. That's an empirical law, which says that every 2 years, our power doubles. Yeah. Well, if you go back 60 years and you compare the power then with now, that is what we do now in a second would take years over there. Yeah. And this was one of the main reasons why we had to wait until the year 2000 to have a real boost in machine learning, although many things happened before that. So this is one example of a machine learning algorithm. And what you have to remember over here is that we have a hypothesis space. Yeah. So the HX, these are all the possible hypotheses. And in this example, each hypothesis is characterized by one weight vector. And what a machine learning algorithm is doing is searching in the hypothesis space, looking for the best possible explanation of the data. So at the end of the day, it will return you one hypothesis H, and that one hypothesis will be used in practice. Yep. And so this gives you an overview of what happens in standard machine learning. So on top, on the left, you have the unknown target function. Yeah, the target generated the data, but you have no idea what it is, and this is what you try to discover. What you know about the target is the so-called training examples. So for a number of data points X, you know the corresponding value of the target function. It's the label Y in case of classification. It's a scalar value in case of regression. Yeah? And then we have a learning algorithm. And on the one hand, it will look at the training set. And on the other hand, it will look at the corresponding hypothesis set. So each learning algorithm has an associated hypothesis set, but they differ for different learning algorithms. And so learning means in this context optimization. I'm looking in the hypothesis set to find the best possible explanation. Yeah? And that will be returned. That's the so-called final hypothesis, which is always labeled here G. So G is the best result that I have. And what you would like is that it approximates F very well overall. Yeah? But the only thing that we are sure about is that G and F, they will be very similar on the training set. And then you hope that they are also similar outside the training set. Yeah? Because you will use your final hypothesis in practice on data that haven't seen before. And if you didn't do it well, your results will not be very good. Yeah? And that's the problem of generalization. And this is a huge problem. And most of the people even don't think about it. Yeah? They say, I have a machine learning algorithm. I can do machine learning. Well, what you can do is you can find a final hypothesis, which is very good on the training set. Yeah, so you will have good correspondence with the target that generated the data, but you don't know the target. Yeah. And you would like to have that G and F overall are very similar. And how could you ever know? Yeah? And this is, in a sense, the central problem of machine learning. And just to give you an idea, yeah, so now you can use all your own algorithms. So we have a very simple classification task. Yeah. So the first row are negative examples. And the second row are positive examples. Yeah? And so now you start, this is your training set, and now you start to learn. And now I'm asking you to apply your final hypothesis to the example below. Yeah. So, and who thinks the example below belongs to the positive class? Yeah. Who thinks it belongs to the negative class? So most people are not thinking. Anyway, both are correct, because you can argue that this is a negative example because on the top left corner is black. And this is also true for the first row. Yeah? But you can also argue it belongs to the second class, because the second row, these are all symmetric figures, and this is also a symmetric figure. Yeah. So how can we generalize from these examples? Yeah. And maybe in case of regression, it's even easier if I have some data points, so the red points, I have some noise, and then I have applied a number of learning algorithms, and they came, so the blue curve is the target function, yeah, which generated the data. I mean, in this case, I knew the target. I chose the target to generate the data. And then I have applied a number of learning algorithms, and you see they come all up with very different answers. And then the question is, okay, why is one better than the other? Why does one generalize better than the other? And it's a hard problem, involves a lot of mathematics, and most people skip it. Yeah, and I don't think it's a good idea. Yeah. Okay, so this was the first part. Are there any questions about this so far? So I tried to explain briefly what is standard machine learning so that I can contrast it with Bayesian machine learning. And the basic idea is that the learning algorithm is searching the hypothesis set for a final hypothesis that you hope is a very good result. Yeah, and the way you find the final hypothesis is the result of an optimization process. Yeah. Now we will look at A/B testing, and we will contrast the two, Bayesian and standard. I explained already briefly in the beginning what is meant by A/B testing. You have two alternatives, and you want to know which one is the best. And there are many applications. For instance, web design also. I mean, you can look at two designs, A and B, and then you see to which one people respond better. And then, of course, you want to use that in practice. Layout of online newspapers. Okay, people want to click, and so you want to make it attractive to click, etc. These are all examples of A/B testing. It's very simple. And okay, I will skip these parts. But the basic difference between Bayesian machine learning, okay, I can go back over here. The basic difference between Bayesian machine learning and standard machine learning will be the following. So Bayesian machine learning will apply a probability distribution over the hypothesis set. So we will have a probability distribution over the hypothesis set, yeah, and we have to define one before we can start to do Bayesian inference. Yeah, and that initial distribution is called the prior. And then we will apply a Bayes rule, and using the data that we have, the training set, and we will get then another distribution called the posterior distribution. So I have a probability distribution at the end of learning over the hypothesis set. And now if I want to make a decision, so the decisions in standard machine learning were based on the final hypothesis. Well, what I now will do, I will involve all the hypotheses. So I will take the average, and but the hypothesis will have a weight, yeah, which depends on the posterior distribution. Yeah, so some of them will have a high weight because they are very likely, they explain quite well the data, while others, they have a very low weight, and so they don't explain the data very well. And you will average over all these hypotheses, and you will also have a spread around the average, and that will give you the uncertainty that you have in your predictions. Yeah? While if I apply G to some new data point, it gives me an answer. While here, I will have the average answer, but I will have a spread around the average answer, which quantifies the uncertainty, which is one of the interesting aspects. Okay. Now, there is, I mean, the difference between Bayesian and standard, but I will skip this. It's also a philosophical issue. Yeah. And basically, okay, and often in statistics, people use then frequency statistics versus Bayesian statistics. Yeah, and what are some basic differences? One is that a frequentist can only assign probabilities to what is called aleatory randomness. So this is randomness in the world, which, okay, is there. If you flip a coin, there is randomness over there. While for a Bayesian, the Bayesian use probabilities to quantify your knowledge, your belief about what's happening. Yeah, and this means that you can apply Bayesian inference to areas where you cannot apply frequentist statistics. Because in case of frequentist statistics, you assume that you can repeat the same experiment under the same conditions. So I can flip a coin 100 times and basically the circumstances are the same. Yeah. While if you want to say something about something which happens only once, then you cannot apply the philosophy of frequentist statistics. Okay, maybe a few examples. Yeah. So the Bayesian interpretation is a degree of belief. Yeah. And for instance, you can assign a probability to a statement like Gor Mahia will win against the AC Leopards. And based on the names of the people, I think most are fans of Gor Mahia, if I'm not wrong. By the way, we have a Kenyan playing for the Belgium national team, Origi. Yeah. Okay, and then in statistics, people that are educated in statistics, usually they were exposed to frequentist statistics, while in machine learning, Bayesian statistics are dominant. Now, one of the reasons why it became dominant in machine learning is maybe because they were not exposed to statistics and they were not aware of the battles that raged long time ago between the two camps. So they were not spoiled by that. But another reason is that because in order to apply Bayesian statistics, in some cases, you can do it analytically. So given the prior distribution, given the data, only in some cases you can produce the posterior in analytical form. Yeah. Otherwise, you will need computational techniques. And okay, that's what people in machine learning, because it's an area in computer science, are doing. And they have found some ways to do that. Yeah. So I will skip that, but so this is a bit of the philosophy, the difference between the frequentist point of view and the Bayesian point of view. But later on, you can take a look at this. Yeah. Now my example, and I took here the Swedish Fish Incorporated. So it's a company in Sweden. And you can buy subscriptions, and then every week or so you get some fish. And okay, they have a large group of customers in Sweden, and they want to enter the Danish market. Okay, on my way from my hotel to Strathmore, I realized maybe instead of Swedish Fish Incorporated, I should use Global Tilapia. And then we have the Kenyan market and the Tanzanian market, etc. Anyway, yeah. And so that company, they want to go to the Danish market, and they have some experience with two methods. So they are sending a colorful brochure to a number of people. And then some of these people, they sign up for such a subscription. And the second method that they have is that apart from the brochure, they also send you a frozen salmon that you can defreeze and taste. Of course, that's a little bit more expensive. And the data that they had about the two methods, they didn't have a lot. So they have sent to 16 people brochures, and 6 of them responded and took a subscription. While for the second method, they also sent it to 16 people, and 10 out of these 16 responded, asked for a subscription. And now you would like to know which one is the best and how sure can I be about that? No? And so, for instance, that company can have a number of questions. Okay, for instance, if I would apply each of these methods, not only to 16 people, but to 100 or 1,000, how many can I expect to sign up? So you want to make some kind of prediction. So that's one question. Yeah. Then another is, okay, which of the two methods is better? Okay, maybe based on the data, you have a guess already, but how sure are you about that? Yeah. Then moreover, is it possible to incorporate domain knowledge? Because in that company, you have people that are doing the advertising part, and they have already a lot of experience, and they know that, okay, never more than 20% will respond, etc., etc. Is it possible to use that knowledge in order to improve on your predictions? And then the most important part, which is often not considered in machine learning, is decision. I mean, which one of the two methods should I use? And if you go back over here, is, okay, the cost of the two methods will be different. Yeah. Okay, the cost of method B also includes the frozen salmon. And does that pay off? Yeah, will I get more subscriptions given that extra cost? So these are the kind of questions that you would like to answer. Yeah. And okay, so now what is at the heart of Bayesian inference? Well, that's Bayes' rule. Yeah. And what you have at the very end is called the prior. Yeah. So theta will be the subscription rate. I don't know the subscription rate. Yeah. So it will be between 0 and 1. And before I can start the whole process, in order to bootstrap the process, I have to define the prior. Yeah. Well, one possibility is because I have no idea, I take a uniform prior. I assume that any subscription rate is equally likely. Yeah. Then the next thing is for each of these values of theta, how well do they explain the data? Okay, for instance, the data that I have in this example for method A was 6 out of 16 people responded. Yeah. Well, if I take a theta of 0, that cannot explain this data because then none would have responded. Yeah. While a theta of 0.5 will be more likely. Yeah. And this is called, okay, the statisticians among you know that already, but this is called the likelihood. So for each possible value of theta, I mean, how well does it explain the data? Yeah. And then based on these two and the evidence, you can get the posterior distribution. So this will then give you the degree of belief in the value of theta. So I don't have one single value, I will have a probability distribution. And in a moment, we will see these distributions. Yeah. And the posterior will be more peaked than the prior. It means that I'm more confident. I know more or less where it's based. Yeah. And apart from that, which is also important, is that the evidence, so the denominator, often this is very hard to compute, but you can get it automatically because you know that the posterior is a probability distribution. So it has to integrate to 1, and this will deliver you the evidence automatically. That's one thing. Another thing is that there are algorithms that only use the ratios of the priors and the posteriors, and then the evidence cancels. By the way, notice that the evidence does not depend on theta. Yeah. So it means that we can summarize Bayes' rules very simply, like the posterior distribution. Your degree of belief in theta, after you have seen the data, is proportional to the prior. That's your belief before you have seen the data times the likelihood. And then you can make predictions for new values. Okay, it's a bit complicated mathematical expression. So we want to make the prediction, that's to the left. So we have seen the data. Now I have a new data point, x new, and I want to predict the corresponding y new. And instead of predicting one value, I will predict the probability. Yeah, so this is the difference with standard machine learning. And how do I do that? Well, I take an integral. So I take an integral over delta t, so it means I'm involving all the thetas. So I'm involving all the hypotheses. One hypothesis, theta is 0. Another one is theta is 0.5. And I'm involving all of them, and that integral is some kind of average over it. Yeah. Forget the details. That's the idea. Yeah. Now, and I mentioned already that to obtain the posterior in an analytical way is in many cases hard, but in this very simple example, we can do it if we are using the beta distribution. And the beta distribution is a probability distribution that has two parameters, alpha and beta, which are non-negative, but we are only using here integer values. Yeah, and so for different values of alpha and beta, you see the beta distribution. Okay. Now, what do we need in order to quantify the value of the subscription rate theta? That's unknown, yeah, and the Bayesian way. Well, first of all, we need data, and the data that we have, we know that 6 out of 16 they subscribed. Then we will have to make explicit what is our degree of belief in the distribution of theta before we have seen the data. Yeah, and either you can use an informative prior, for instance, uniform distribution, because I think they are equally likely. Yeah, or the CEO of the company, because he has a lot of experience, he can use an informative one. And by the way, that will be a way to incorporate domain knowledge into Bayesian inference. Yeah? And we can calculate the likelihood. And in this case, the posterior is easy to obtain. Okay, it's shown over there. So if we take as prior also a beta distribution with parameters A and B, for instance, in case of the uniform distributions, A and B are both 1. Yeah, and then if we see that S is 6, the number of subscriptions, and N is the total number of people that we have addressed, then we get an analytical expression for the beta distribution. Okay. So I will skip this part, and now I will go over to a notebook, because I have said that in this case, we can do it analytically, but that's exceptional. In most cases, you cannot do it, and you will have to do it in a computational way. And that's what I will address now, but I will switch to a Jupyter notebook. So then I can show also the programs. So where are we? Here. So now I have to share this one. But yeah, so sorry. So I just do the same. So everyone, also the online audience, can see this. Yeah, good. So this is a Python, a Jupyter notebook, and we will address that also during the panel discussion. Yeah. And I will go to it briefly. I will leave it here. You can also run with it. And basically what happens over here is that instead of drawing the graph of the probability distribution function, what you are doing is you are representing the probability function by generating random samples according to that distribution. So for instance, here I'm taking a uniform prior, and instead of representing it explicitly, I've generated many random samples, and then I draw a histogram, and you can see that, of course, it's not perfectly flat, but it's a reasonable approximation, and the more samples that I have, the better it will be. Yeah. And then I can also generate the posterior, yeah, based on samples only. And this is the result of Bayesian learning, giving the data that 6 people out of 16 subscribed, yeah, starting from a uniform prior. And then if you look, and again, I did not represent I did not represent the posterior explicitly. I did it by generating samples. Yeah? Now, how did I generate samples from the posterior? I mean, the idea was is quite simple, but I don't have the time to go into it, but it's explained in the notebook, and you can also run it. Okay, by the way, this is code, okay, like cell number 7, this is code, and you can, this is a line of code. You can evaluate it, and if you evaluate it, then it will generate the corresponding graph. Yeah. And then let's look at method B. So I can do the same exercise for method B. And remember, there we had 10 people that subscribed out of 16. So if I also start with the uniform distribution, then I get this posterior represented as a histogram. And by the way, this is a very big difference between Bayesian and frequentist statistics, because the frequentist would come up with 2-point estimates. So he has one value, while here I have a distribution. Yeah? And so automatically I have some notion of uncertainty. The more spread the distribution, the more uncertain that I am. So this is an advantage that I have. And then I would like to answer some questions like which one now of the two is better, A or B? Yeah. And so I can draw the two posterior distributions over here. And then I can do, so the yellow one is for A and the blue one is for B. So visually, you expect that B is better than A, but you can also do the calculation. And the calculation is shown somewhere over here. Yeah. So here, the probability that method B is better than A, and by the way, again, this is not something that the frequentist can do. Yeah. Here I can say the probability that A is better than B is like 85%. Yeah. Based on very simple data. Now, you could say, okay, we start to do method B because it's better. Yeah? But you want to make a rational decision, and that includes also the cost price of your campaign. Yeah? And this can also be incorporated very easily in the model. Yeah? So what we do over here is the following. If we are sending a brochure, then it costs €3. If we are sending a brochure and a salmon, then that will cost me €30. Yeah, and of course, if you are addressing 1,000 people, you are sending all of them the brochure, and some of them also the frozen salmon. Yeah. But only few of them, they are subscribing. And these are responsible for your profit. Yeah? And so the profit, we assume that our profit is €100. Yeah? And we can again do the model over here. And what you see, and maybe a bit surprising, is that the probability that method A, which is worse, yeah, but the probability that you make more profit for A than B is more than 90%. Yeah, and in this way, I could I could do this because I combined it with Bayesian decision theory. I could not explain the details, and this is something you can do in a very natural way with Bayesian machine learning, which is hard to do with standard machine learning. And in many cases, I mean, the end user of machine learning, he's not interested in predictions. He wants to know, what can I do with these predictions? How can I base my decisions on these predictions? Yeah. And for instance, I'm working here. I'm co-supervising a PhD student here at Strathmore from mathematics. She is, and what she's doing is she's looking at different models for malaria. You have different models of malaria that explain the spread. Now, one of the problems, and these are models like ordinary differential equations, yeah, and they have a number of parameters. Now, in physics, you know the parameter values very well, yeah. You know the speed of light, etc. Yeah, but you don't know the rate of infection of malaria and mosquitoes in humans. You don't know how many people are bitten by mosquitoes, etc. So there you are very uncertain about all these parameter values. Well, you can also apply the Bayesian framework to this kind of mathematical model. So this is much more complicated than A/B testing. Yeah, and at the end, you get a spread of all your parameter values. Yeah, so you have an idea how sure you are about the parameter values. Okay, for instance, COVID. I mean, the whole world is suffering suffering of COVID. Okay, what is the reproduction number? It's not an exact constant. Yeah, so you would like to be able to quantify the uncertainty. Yeah, and then you can use these models that have quantified uncertainty to make decisions, right? Because the government has only limited resources. I mean, I can use that money to give masks to everyone, or I can use that money to give only few people a vaccine, because then my money is gone. And you would like to find out the way I have illustrated over here, which is the best way to act, because you can also include the cost of your decisions. And with this, I would like to conclude, because I think I'm talking already too long. I will be still around here, and also I'm coming here next Monday, so I'm available for discussion. I think this will be distributed. You can take a look at this. And if you're interested, we can have chats about this. I would like you to thank you. Okay, yeah, I should go back to my slides to conclude. So thank you for your attention. Questions? Okay, the reason why I added this, the two-armed bandit, because A/B testing is also an example of armed bandits. So these are the slot machines in the casinos, yeah. And this is an extension of what I have done, and because now I have some data, two methods A and B, 6 versus 10 out of 16, yeah. And now the next question that you might have is, I don't know which one is the best, yeah. So how many samples do I need from A and B so that I can decide as quickly as possible which one is the best? And that's then called the so-called armed bandit problem. So then you make it an online problem. So how do I distribute? How do I distribute my samples over the two cases? For instance, in medicine, if you want to find out whether medicine A is better than B, I mean, you have the standard trials, yeah. But it means that, let's say that A is not good. It means that you have given A to a lot of people and they didn't have any benefit from it, yeah. So instead, what you could do is you could start with 2 small samples, and then using this kind of techniques. And what will happen is that at the end you will assign more and more samples to the better method, so you don't have to waste resources on the worst. And also ethically, I think it's a better thing to do. So thank you for your attention. And questions now or later, you are welcome. Karibuni.
First, before we go for the round of questions, I wish all of us can appreciate the nice talk that we have had. Can you all appreciate him by a clap? And react, doing a thumbs up, you can also clap. But we want to take your questions, but because of time, we want to take questions, brief questions from those who are physically here. If you have any questions directed to the presentation, to Professor, please raise it, and then we can get some comments from him.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. This is quite insightful. I'm just, it's just an opinion. I would like to seek from you. When I was doing postdoc, the professor focused largely on using R. So we used the R stan, the R jugs and all that to do some of those more advanced Bayesian applications. So in your opinion, what will be more efficient? Because some of those algorithms takes a lot of time to compute. So in your opinion, is Python, of course, I know Python has those versions of the stan and the jugs, and doing all those, yeah. So in your opinion, which one will be more efficient in terms of time management, and what goes at the back end of the system? Thank you.
That's not an easy question. I want to show my slides again because partly I'm talking about it over there. Yeah, so maybe that was also part of the discussion. Well, first of all, I mean, if you're in data science and you don't want to spend the money that you don't need to spend, then either you work with Python or you work with R, because they are both open source. MATLAB, you pay licenses, and at the end of the day, it will cost you a lot. Yeah. Now, R originated in the context of and how do I do that? Yeah, and then I can share my screen. And then you. And then you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I mean, basically, if you go for open source, I mean, it's either Python or R. Now, if you have to start anew, then I would advise you to use Python, because in the computer science community, it's the standard, while R is like the standard in computational statistics. Yeah. Moreover, many of the frameworks, like for deep learning, by companies like Facebook, they have PyTorch, like TensorFlow of Google, etc. They are built on top of Python. Yeah, but you don't have, and also what I would advise, and you can do both in Python and in R, that you are using Jupyter notebooks or Lab. And by the way, Jupyter stands for the language of Julia, which is a new language developed for data science. Then you have Python and R. That's where the name is coming from. And what I have shown you at the end was an example of a Jupyter notebook where you can integrate everything, mathematics, text, visualizations, computing. Yeah. But in order to run your experiments, one of the advantages that you have in Python, I don't know if you can do it in R, is that Jupyter notebooks are also adopted by Google and by Microsoft. Yeah. And if you host them over there, you can use their infrastructure, which is all this heavy stuff. And for machine learning, you need heavy stuff. I don't know if you can do that in R, but for sure, but probably you can also do it in R. You can host your notebooks over there. In my experience, R, it's much harder to read than Python. Yeah. What's also good is you can combine both languages in one notebook. For instance, R has very good visualization procedures. If you have experience with them, then you can write a Python program. And if you want to visualize your data, you can use the R procedures. And it's not that difficult. I have done it. If I can do it because I'm a mathematician with hands like this, I think everyone can do it. Yeah. But if you start a new Python, but use notebooks, host them on this infrastructure, and then you can run them on heavy stuff, at least for limited resources you get for free. Okay.
Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you, Prof, for the presentation. I have two of them, but I see if maybe time allows us to have or to deal with one. It deals with something you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation about the fairness of machine learning models, right? And a good example that you also raised was in terms of credit, for example. And the biggest challenge is normal decision making in a way is sort of discriminating, right, between individuals, and that's a way you're able to, know who to give credit or who not to. But now the challenge is, how do you ensure that, yes, you still want to make the right decision, which in a way is discrimination, which what you can call positive discrimination, to ensure that the models that you develop, you sort of do away with the negative discrimination. So how do you allude to that? The second one is, if time allows, is in the classical modeling, let's say, let me use an example in finance, is where if you're structuring a new product, you don't have data for that. You can use a proxy model for another instrument that you know to be able to do that. But now with machine learning framework, you sort of need a lot of data. What are maybe the downsides to using this proxy instrument that you have already existing in the market to do this?
Okay, it's a very good question and a very tough question, because bias is an issue, and not only bias, also explainability. Yeah. Because nowadays people, they are using machine learning techniques to make predictions. For instance, in the United States, luckily in Europe, we have some law that is more strict than the United States. But for instance, nowadays in the United States, if you apply for a job, then chances are really high that your CV is scanned by a machine learning algorithm and will say no or no go, and you have no idea for what reason. Because something that I didn't explain here, but many machine learning algorithms, they have knowledge, and the knowledge is in the weights, but it's hard to make explicit what is the knowledge. Yeah, so nobody has any idea, and still these algorithms are used, although in Europe we have much more strict regulations on that. Bias, I mean, that's a general problem. I mean, everyone in statistics knows about this. It took some time in machine learning to realize there is some bias. Yeah, and just to give you some crazy examples, one of the recent studies was, I mean, maybe you remember there was a theory in the 19th century that you could decide beforehand whether someone was a criminal or not based on facial features. And then some machine learning researchers, they tried to do the same. Yeah, so they took many pictures of people which were not criminals and others that were criminals, and then they claimed they had an algorithm that could do the job. Yeah. Now there was lots of bias, because if you collect pictures of people that I mean are not in prison, they look much more happy than people which are in prison. Yeah. and most pictures made on prison, they are made on some background. So the machine learning algorithm was just discovering that person doesn't look sad. It doesn't say anything. Yeah. So, I mean, you can do many crazy things. Fairness is an issue, and nowadays people are paying attention to it. And how can you address it? First of all, you have to be sure that you have no bias in your data. Yeah. And for instance, I gave you the example of the bank. The bank has lots of information about customers. Well, these data are biased. You have any idea why there is a bias? So a bank has historical records. Today, I want to use machine learning. I'm applying it to the records I have of my previous clients. Well, there is bias over there because you have no information about all the people that last year you have sent away. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a huge issue. What I wanted to say in my talk is that what will be essential and to address this kind of problems, but it will not be only that, is you have to be able to quantify uncertainty. That will be already a first step. What will be also important is that you are sure that your data are unbiased, which is always very difficult. You have to ensure that you can explain what your machine learning algorithm is doing. Yeah, which is also not an easy thing. And actually, I mean, there's only one good explanation, because sometimes you can find correlations and you can make them explicit. Yeah. For instance, there is a correlation between the size of a hand and the size of the vocabulary. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you know the age, then that makes sense, because young people have small hands and have a small vocabulary. Yeah. Of course, there are some outliers, like Trump, seems to have small hands. So at the end of the day, the only good explanation is not because you can understand something, a rule. Okay, for instance, a bank in Chicago discovered based on data that if your family name is ending with ski, then it's better not to give them a credit card. Yeah, well, that makes sense. You can understand it. If you look at the neural network, you cannot even understand that, yeah? But it does not make sense, yeah? And okay, it was true because around Chicago, many people are living there of Polish descent. Most Polish people name ends with ski, and they belong to lower social classes, didn't go to college, etc. So then this is more a causal explanation. Okay, and at the end of the day, the only good explanation are causal explanations. And by the way, this is one of the hot research topics in computer science, but not only in computer science, in health and in economics. Yeah? You try to give a causal explanation for what's happening. Now, I mean, science is about causal explanations, yeah, and the way to address is to do controlled experiments. But there are some areas where you cannot do controlled experiments. I mean, in economics, I mean, there's only one economy, there is only one history. You cannot say, okay, let's try for 1 year what will happen if you do this to do that. Yeah. So you have only data, but sometimes it's possible to derive causal relations from observational data. While usually in science, you discover causality by manipulating, by acting, yeah. So that's also an area, but it's still a long way to go. We are only at the beginning. Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. There is one more question. I think I will summarize it here.
Yep.
And these are coming from the online
Yep.
participants. They ask, how can we access the Jupyter notebook for those online? And also, how can we access the A/B testing notebook?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I will make it available, so that will depend on the organization here. So I will make a small folder where we have the slides of today, the notebook of today, and the notebook of yesterday. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We wish to appreciate again Professor Mandarik. Let's appreciate him again. from us here in Strathmore, we also want to appreciate him with a gift. So we will request Dr. Kashenga to do the honors of sharing the gift with Professor Mandarik. Thank you again for agreeing to this task, Dr. Kashenga.
Karibuni.
For those joining online, please do a thumbs up. Let's clap. Let's appreciate Dr. Mandarik.
I've been to many Indian universities, and I've never seen one such organized as Stanford University.
Behind the schedule, but we will try to keep up and deliver the program as planned. The next session is to have the panel. So I'll be calling out the panels to come. But before I do that, I wish also to recognize those of us joining online, especially the scientific committee that planned this conference, Professor Sylvain Sabeka and Professor Omolo Ongati. Thank you so much for joining online. Also, we have other countries joining us online. We wish to appreciate them too. Next in the program, I think we are having the panel. And the panel team here is composed of the moderator. I want to welcome and invite our moderator for today for this special conference, mathematical conference, Professor Thomas Ashia. Please come to the stage. We also wish to welcome our panelists. They are here with us, Professor Bernard Domolo from the University of South Carolina, Upstate. Please, let's appreciate them. You can do a thumbs up, you can still do claps and reacting from those who are joining us from online. And then we have Dr. Samuel Chege from Microsoft Kenya. Please join us in the stage. We also have Delby. We have Dr. Shelby Daniel from iLab Africa, Strathmore University. Thank you so much. So we have about 30 minutes to go through the panel discussion, and I will want to take this chance now to offer this session officially to Professor Thomas Ashia.
I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this session, a very stimulating talk on an area that is fast growing and fast developing. And I hope that some of these pointers that he mentioned will be useful in the discussion that is about to commence. I acknowledge, I want to appreciate the Vice Chancellor Designate for having been in the session, Professor John Odhiambo, for a teacher to many of us, for participating in this session, and the the Dean of the Institute of Mathematical Sciences as well for participating in this. The theme of this conference, as we all know, is advancing research and education in mathematics, mathematical sciences in the era of big data. So this big data issue is something that I will want this panel to speak to. Thinking about something someone says, a gentleman called Rob Gonda talks about adaptability as being key to the survival in the age of digital Darwinism. In this age of digital Darwinism, adaptability is key to survival. And he speaks about, he quotes Darwin from The Origins of the Species, where Darwin says, "It is not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species that survives, but the one that is most adaptable to change." And we are living in a very interesting time because we are in a species where adaptation is ruled by technology. Currently, I have serious challenges using my phone and various gadgets in my house. And I'm realizing I'm getting really outdated. So adaptability in this era that is ruled by change, connectivity, data analytics, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things. So it is important for various disciplines to adapt to be able to survive in this era. And with me in the panel I will ask the panelists, I'll go around. We have Professor Bernard Omolo from the University of South Carolina, upstate. I know that he is a visiting professor at the University of Witwatersrand and University of South Africa, and several universities around the globe where he is supporting. In the panel, we have Dr. Shege. Dr. Shege, Samuel Shege, is a senior applied scientist at Microsoft Africa Research Institute. He's also a lecturer, senior lecturer within the Institute of Mathematical Sciences at Strathmore. Within the panel, we also have Dr. Shelby Dannell, who is a research and academic director at iLab within Strathmore. And I am really privileged to also have our keynote speaker, Professor Manderik, as part of this panel. And I will not speak much longer. I want to go straight to the business of this hour. Big data. Big data. And this word is flying around everywhere. And I want to start with Dr. Shelby, because of your background in computer science. What is big data?
So big data, let us explain one of the biggest buzzwords of today. It is what it sounds like. It's an extraordinarily large amount of information. So in the last 2 years, with our computers and with social media and everything, we have generated over 90% of the world's data, multiple, petabytes or zettabytes? I don't even know. The number is too large. And being able to make money off of that data by understanding that data is what all the large companies are trying to do. So big data is just an overwhelming amount of data that we initially or more recently came into the ability to be able to analyze and understand. And we need to use more techniques like Bayesian machine learning that Professor Mundrick just spoke about, so that we can use it more properly, more morally, and more appropriately.
Thanks, Doc. I would like to just follow up on this. You've spoken about machine learning, predictive modeling, artificial intelligence, and so this sort of brings me into the realm of data science. And I wonder whether there is really any link between data science and machine learning and big data. And so I'd like to pose a question to Dr. Chege around data science. What is data science? What connections are there between data science and machine learning?
I think now that's okay. Yeah. Wow. That's a tough one also to respond to, the link between data science and machine learning. I sort of almost say there's definitely a huge intersection, if not an overlap, between one and the other. So as an advisor, I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a mathematician by training and profession. But I look at it in terms of data science, if I was to use that word, because sometimes we use them interchangeably, depending on who you're talking to, is just a methodology or a way of using the existing algorithms or the ones that you can develop to be able to solve a domain problem. So I look at it in terms of, if I was to use the word data science, now that I like using them interchangeably, to ask myself, how can I use the tools that exist from the scientific world, and in this case, as a mathematician from the mathematical world, linking it up with computing skills or computing technologies to solve a specific domain problem. That's how I'd talk about it.
Thanks, Dr. Chege. I know there are mathematicians, computer scientists. Yes, I'll go to the statistician. And I know within the domain of statistics, we hear of applied statistics. People speak of biometrics. They speak of areas of learning like biostatistics. Data science, is this just a new buzzword for existing fields of knowledge in the disciplines of statistics? Professor Omolo.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Chair, for posing the question. I think it's important for us to understand what data science is and what statistics is by definitions before we are able to distinguish them or see where they overlap. I think, in my opinion, data science is this multidisciplinary approach to making decisions based on information that is generated from a particular domain of influence or area of endeavor. And data science involves the application of mathematical and statistical methods in the collection of the data, the analysis of the data, and also interpretation and communication of the analysis to stakeholders of the data. And so we see that in just that part of data science, statistical methodologies come into play. Mathematical techniques are also used. And we are also aware that statistical learning, which is basically using data to make inference about certain unknowns in the population, are now also using methods that are used in data science, like the machine learning methods that Dr. Mandrick talked about today. So, in my opinion, I think that data science includes statistics. So statistics is defined as the methodologies for data collection, analysis, and interpretation. But statistics cannot handle some of the data that we have today, the big data. So we need more techniques, more advanced techniques that are beyond statistics. And these techniques are in data science, like the machine learning methodologies. So if you want to distinguish the two, you could say that when it comes to big data analysis, statistical method, the routine or the traditional statistical methods may not be sufficient. So you need more methods from other spheres. And so the collection of all these methods that could also handle big data is what's called data science.
Thank you very much, Prof. Bernard. I want to just continue with this discussion and just pull on board Professor Manderik as a mathematician, as a statistician and a data scientist, just on the same question, and just bringing on board the relevance and the role of mathematics in data science and in big data analytics. What are your thoughts? What role does mathematics play?
Okay. So based on my experience in teaching machine learning for quite some time, well, first of all, I'm doing it in a computer science department. And until machine learning became an important part in the program, mathematics didn't play a large role. Yeah? And as a result, many bachelors in computer science, they have limited background in mathematics. And actually, over the years, we have reduced the loads of mathematics, and maybe now we will regret it. Now, if I look at the kind of mathematics that I have used or that were helpful when I was reading papers, etc., I've made here a list. Just some examples: linear algebra. If you look like something like linear regression, okay, you need linear algebra to understand that. There is an important Bayesian regression technique, which is called Gaussian processes. Well, for that, you need probability theory and stochastic processes. Also, I mentioned at the end of my talk during one of the questions, the notion of causality, which is also studied in that context. It's good to know about Bayesian and frequency statistics, but even more advanced areas like functional analysis. Yeah. If you look at Gaussian processes that I mentioned, or also support vector machines, which is a machine learning technique, they are using what is called reproducing kernel Hilbert spaces. Yeah. So then, of course, a lot has to do with optimization. Convex optimization is, for instance, used in logistic regression. Constraint optimization, Lagrange multipliers, quadratic programming is used in support vector machines. And then deep learning relies a lot on non-convex optimization. Also, discrete mathematics, especially graph theory, is important. Yeah, then I have talked already about quantifying uncertainty, which is like now coming up also in mathematics. So you have all kinds of mathematical models which are dependent on parameters that you don't know exactly. On the other hand, you have a number of data, and then you try to quantify the uncertainty in your models. And also you try to then decide which is the best one. You try to combine them, etc. But even things that at first you wouldn't make the connection to machine learning, like topology. Well, there is research in machine learning which relies on topology. So there is something called topological data science. Actually, once I have seen an overview paper of like 100 pages, which was discussing mathematics for machine learning and the applications in machine learning. I will try to find it back and leave it here. But so I found over there Morse theory, and this is something that I did in my master thesis in mathematics long time ago. Morse theory, which is used in the context of machine learning. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot. So it would be hard to find an area of mathematics which has no impact on on machine learning. That's my opinion.
Thanks, Prof. You've really walked us through the potential utilization of mathematics in the area of data science, and it's quite exciting, this being a mathematics conference. But I want to bring Dr. Shelby into this discussion as a computer scientist. I really am looking at depth and in both computer science and in mathematics, and I would like to just seek your thoughts about how deep do you think one needs to go as a mathematician, as a data scientist in mathematics? What is the depth in computer science that you feel is relevant for training a good data scientist? This is my teacher, and I think it's important to give him a chance. It's very exciting. Way back in 1995, when Professor Diambo taught me, I thought he had lost the fire.
Just at the beginning, so
Okay.
what do I do? I can speak
Yes,
from here,
face
right?
the camera.
Yeah, the comment I wanted to make is the following. You know, in all this, as the mathematical thinking progresses, you know, at the beginning, people are thinking there, then the basic concept of mathematics progressed. Then there was the concept of uncertainty that then gave a bearing to statistics. You see, all the mathematics just evolving, eh? Then we started applying mathematics, applying laws of physics that led to applied mathematics that has now, and so on, eh? You see, so that is how the thinking evolved. So then we statistics then evolved as a distinctive, just because of disciplinary progression, as a distinctive subject area, statistical science. What did it entail? That dealing with, you want to quantify uncertainty and use that to make decisions. And the paradigm was that you are going to take observations and base your hypothesis on them. So estimation and hypothesis testing was critical decision making in statistics. Eh? So you have data here and you have hypotheses to check. Then how does data science evolve? You see, in the 50s, we started seeing statisticians begin to think of EDA, exploratory data analysis. We are saying, you see, we are always starting with this is the null hypothesis, and we want to check it. Take the data, check it out. Suppose we didn't know it. So they're saying, I want to learn what the data is telling me before I go to the next stage of confirming. So we started EDA and then confirmatory. Bernard, that's correct, right? Right. So in fact, exploratory data analysis and display of data as part of data science is exactly for the same purpose. You want to learn from data, then take it from there. You understand? So that's how it evolved. That now we want, instead of starting from, I have these beliefs, I want to check them, I want to learn what the data tells me. And so with the exploration, the explosion in data, you discover that you can no longer make too many assumptions. You want to learn from it. That is how data science comes to be. And that is why you see there's a strong overlap of what we are doing in mathematics and what we need to do in data science. That's the thing. That is the thing. So it's called the thinking, eh? And contribute from the thinking process.
Thank you very much, Prof. As the organizers gave us 30 minutes, I actually felt like that isn't even going to hit the tip of the iceberg. Because the excitement generated is, as you can see, quite hefty. I'm actually getting a number of questions, but I want to go back to Dr. Shelby and thank Professor Diambo for contributing to this discussion and for giving us that historical, contextual analysis of the development of data science.
All right, so first thing, I'm going to speak to my biases. I am a trained software engineer. I've been writing software for 25 years. So I feel like data scientists need a deep understanding of software or computer science. To that end, if you're going to get a bachelor's in computer science, you're generally trying to learn how to be a full stack software engineer, for instance. So you're doing back-end coding, you're learning algorithms, data structures, and then you do some front-end things, right? So you can combine all those things. However, a data scientist doesn't necessarily need to understand front-end development because they have amazing tools like Dr. Mandrick was speaking about, Jupyter Notebooks, where you can do visualization very nicely, and then R, where you can do visualization well. So a data scientist really needs to understand enough computer science in the areas of very important data structures, especially because you're dealing with such large amounts of information. You have to get the best data structures for the type of information you're using. And then they have to understand fundamentals of machine learning. They have to understand fundamental algorithms, because another thing Professor Dr. Mandrick spoke about during his talk is, what's the point of you trying to use machine learning tools and these other tools if you have no understanding of how they work and their parameters and everything else? So now it's like, what do we call this? What's a good analogy to use? I don't even know a good analogy, but you need to have a very good foundation, right? You're not going to build a house without having your cornerstones, right? So if you only have sidewalls and no cornerstones, at some point your house is going to topple, just like that house in Florida, or that apartment building in Florida, just toppled, fell over on top of itself. But either way, you have to have a deep foundation in computer science as far as data structures, because you're dealing with such large amounts of data, parallel programming, because that's going to be necessary for these large amounts of data, general algorithms, and then you have to dip into machine learning algorithms as well. Otherwise, you're going to be completely lost, because as the other panelists have spoken about, when you're dealing with data science, it's intersectional with a lot of different specializations, and mostly the statistics and machine learning. Right? And if you don't understand that, when you're doing your computer science background, you're going to crumble as a data scientist.
Add to that?
Please go ahead.
Because when people asked me about this conference, I made a list of skills in computer science which are important for machine learning. And one I wrote down was basic software engineering skills, which is something which you usually overlooked. I mean, everybody starts to program, and then you run into all the problems that you get. So I wrote, okay, I mean, learn how to write readable programs, how programs can be maintained, documentation, testing codes, include tests, etc., etc.
As Professor Mandrick is talking about software engineering, one of the things you have to learn as a software engineer, as a coder, is how to fix your errors, understanding and fixing your errors. Okay, that's just one super big thing.
And then the other skill was using GitHub.
You will die without being able to understand software versioning and repositories. You will die as a coder, and you can lose a lot of work.
Okay, for mathematicians that don't know about GitHub, you can put it simply. I mean, you have free accounts where you can host your projects. You have, okay, lots of benefits, version control, collaboration with others, but it's also a way to make your own project available for the outside world. Yeah, so that's what you now see many aspiring data scientists. They are making a portfolio of projects. They host it on GitHub, and then employers, they are looking around. Yeah, and by the way, it's now owned by Microsoft. So.
Thanks, Prof. I can see Professor Bernard getting really excited, and I would like him to also make a couple of comments, and then I want to ask one or two last questions so that we can get the other audience involved.
Thanks, Professor Chair. I just wanted to contribute to the discussion about mathematics and statistics in the big data and data science discussion, or basically why mathematics and statistics is important in data science. And I wanted to say that mathematical sciences, which is mathematics and statistics, would actually be providing the, the scientific background and the methodologies that are actually used in data science. If I'm going to just take a program in R and analyze data with it, without really knowing how that program was developed, I mean, the scientific background or the mathematical background behind that technique that the software is implementing for me, then I think I'm not getting the full picture. You know, I'm only getting half the solution, you know. So mathematicians, statisticians are important in this data science and big data discussion, in the sense that they are the ones that provide the background, the scientific background behind these techniques. Professor Mandrick talked about Bayesian inference today. So without a knowledge in probability theory, somebody will not be able to understand Bayesian inference, okay? Without, you know, basic statistical techniques like hypothesis, setting up and testing, you'll not be able to actually even, you know, do, you know, take a test, what do you call it, experimental set, okay? And then a test set, and then try to do cross-validation and see how that works. So the mathematicians and statisticians are really the heavy lifters when it comes to the methodologies that are actually used in data science, and that's why we still need them. And as you know, we get more and more complex data from various organizations, public health, marketing, banks, name it, genomics. We need to develop new methodologies, and then as a computer scientist, working together with them, we can be able to code this, and then we have free software that can implement some of these things here.
Thanks, Prof. I want to, because of time, move on to something slightly different, because we've gone into the building blocks of these areas of big data analytics and data science. But I want to, I sat in some discussion once, some 15 years ago, as a postdoctoral fellow, and I was in a program called The Dynamics of Building a Better Society. And there was a sociologist, there was a geographer within this forum, and the lead asked us to look at synergies, whether there could be synergies between us and other fields. And the guy seated next to me was a geographer. And so we told, turn to your neighbor and ask for synergies. And he asked me, what do? I said, I'm a mathematician. And he told me, there can be no synergies between you and I. And I will never forget, that was in the year 2010 in Cape Town. And I just want to pose this question about collaborations and potential of collaboration within faculties within the universities. Someone said there is interdisciplinary genocide within universities, and then there is industry-university collaborations within this era of data science. And I want to pose this to Dr. Chege. What do you see as opportunities for those of us in the fields of mathematics and computer science to collaborate with other faculties, and also to collaborate with industry? What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Prof. To answer that question, and I'll come back now to this, how we can do this within the machine learning AI world, I'll go a bit to my background. By training, I'm a mathematical finance person. And in essence, mathematical finance is a field that really blew up nicely in the 70s, right? When someone was doing an economics paper, encountered a problem solving a warrant pricing problem, and had a discussion with someone who was in then what people call applied mathematics, and realized actually the problem you're trying to solve is a heat equation, or to solve is a heat equation. And you see, that by itself actually created the whole field of financial engineering in terms of the focus. Of course, later on, we brought in the whole field of portfolio optimization, which now ties up with the things Professor Mandarik talked about, the convex optimization, dynamic optimization, and all those other optimization fields. And so even looking at that simple example, you realize the importance of interfaculty collaborations in the sense that the sum of the problems that maybe someone in the field of economics is trying to solve, the tools already exist in a totally different field, for example, in mathematics. So I like what Prof has mentioned about how fields like topology, which when I was doing my undergraduate, I used to be like, where do you use this thing? It used to be like, it's just abstract topological space, homological space, words that sometimes you're like, where do you really get to use this? And it's in partnership, in collaborations with other faculties that you actually realize that a problem that you're struggling with, there already exists a solution. Maybe someone has tackled it in a totally different way. And the other reason I'm saying this is also because sometimes we focus so much on reinventing the wheel. And sometimes it's just a question of finding a solution that has been applied elsewhere and actually tweaking it a bit to your domain area, because mapping one-to-one does not necessarily work most of the times. And so it's really all about those partnerships, those collaborations with other people. And then you'll be able to realize, I actually don't need to reinvent the wheel. The solution exists, one piece exists somewhere, another one exists somewhere. And now all you need to do is sort of like some engineering of some sort, bring these things together and make them work in your current context. In terms of collaborations within academia and industry, I think that's quite important. And the reason why that is important is I know most of the discussion is focused a lot on these different components of computer science, statistics, mathematics, but it's also an additional component of domain expertise. Because to build a model that solves, for example, the problem that Prof mentioned about the PhD student, it may require some knowledge of someone who understands a bit of public health and healthcare, right? But you see, the challenge is, as an individual, as Chege within the maths department here, I may not be a domain expert, and clearly I cannot be. And in as much as may exert my effort, it may require me to spend so much time almost like going through another university training. And so that's where also collaborations come in. Let me talk to someone whose the domain expertise is in healthcare. Yes, I need to have what now we've come to acknowledge, and it's really growing, something they're calling a learning mindset and a growth mindset. In the sense that even as an AI person, I need to get to a point where I'm learning a few things here and there that will help me apply my model in a specific domain. I may not be an expert, but at least I need to have the mindset to learn a few things about that area. But because I cannot be an expert, even the output that may come out of it, I may not make so much sense of it. And that will require now the collaborations with the what I'll call domain expertise or subject matter experts.
Thank you very much. I can see Dr. Shelby wants to say something, and then I'll give Professor Mandarik a chance to also speak to the same.
So iLab has actually partnered with SIMS for their Masters of Data Science and Analytics program, because we understand how much collaboration is absolutely necessary, and we don't want to, try to recreate the wheel. And as you can see, SIMS is partnered with Professor Mandarik, who we're also trying to get to help us with our master's program. And in addition to that, we're also trying to get experts from around the world in data science. And we've already gotten one who's going to help us. He's out in industry, and he's a lead data scientist. He has a team of over 500 data scientists to do work worldwide. So we take the collaboration very seriously. We take trying to make sure we create world-class data scientists very seriously here with iLab and SIMS.
Yeah, I agree with what was said, but based on my experience, I would like to add a word of caution, because collaboration is not easy and demands a lot of the people which are involved. And we are all eager to start collaboration, but often they break down quite soon. And I'll give you one example, for instance, in bioinformatics. This was one of the first applications in data science. Okay, there are some easy applications that you don't have to understand the biology, everything related to DNA, etc. But once you are talking about protein folding, for instance, then in order to be useful to the other party, you have to understand the problem. But each domain has its own terminology. You don't know it. and there's a lot of misunderstanding. And after some time, if you're not prepared for it, you will stop it. Just one example, the problem we tried to solve was inverse protein folding. And then in inverse, I was thinking about the inverse in mathematics. And I was interpreting everything in that. And after weeks, I discovered that my interpretation of inverse had nothing to do with, yeah. So it's really a demanding job. Okay, and one example, ESA, the European Space Agency. Yeah, these are all engineers that are working together from European countries, and the main contributors are France and Germans. They are both engineers. They are talking about the same topic. They had to involve Belgians so that they could work together because they have a different culture background. Germans, they organize anything. Even if you have a meeting with two people, first you will discuss the agenda. French, they don't organize anything. Yeah. And this is something, okay, people with a different background, apart from that, they talk about the same thing, it's already difficult. Then imagine if you have to talk to someone from a completely different domain, and you have terminology that sounds like yours, and often you're not aware that you're talking about something differently.
Thanks, Prof.
Yeah.
I would like us to just take questions from the audience. I can see a hand. I'm not very sure that that looks like Professor Manda, but you know, when you wear a mask, you can't really tell. I am right. I haven't seen him in over 2 years since COVID, but it's nice to see you here, Professor Manda. I think you could. This is Professor Manda from the South African Medical Research Council. We would like to welcome his comments.
Sorry, I don't get you. What is that? Oh, I fit people. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, thanks a lot. I am here following discussions in terms of data science. But I am thinking in terms of the syllabus that we actually teach in the universities, from undergrad into master's level, even into PhD supervision. Because if you talk about Bayesian, it's not taught at undergraduate degrees. So you have got, I think somebody coming from nowhere, they go into master's level, and they are doing something called the Bayesian, because they can plug in into Windbags, into BaseX, so many of these ones. Then, of course, data science, it means in skills in terms of, computer, ABCD. So I just want to ask you, whether Prof there, are we equipping our students now for the challenges of data science?
Is there any other question? There's one other question, and I hope the panelists will be able to take that. The other question I've received is from Alfred Kipiga, and Alfred is asking this, and I think this goes to Professor Mandrik. Please explain how to combine textual descriptional data analysis, which are mainly frequentist, vis-a-vis Bayes model kind of machine learning. Are there any limitations in this combination advisable?
Can I see the question, please?
Yes, so the first question from Professor Manda, I don't know whether I would like Professor Omolo to see if he can address this. That question is really valid. You have a data scientist. How do we design our training to ensure that you adequately equip a data scientist at that level?
Yes, thanks, Prof. Manda, for posing that question. I think it's very, very important. It's a very, very important question. And it speaks of what we are also discussing, which is the collaboration or the possible collaboration between the industry and academic institutions. I just want to make a remark that industry and academia are actually primary stakeholders when it comes to data science. Industry are the recipients of trainees from academic institutions in data science. And I think it is in their best interest that they invest in the training of these individuals. And what I was going to say was that one possible area of collaboration between industry and academia is by way of funding data science programs in academic institutions. I think it's very important because if they put their money in this, then they really will get a lot out of it. And so then we come to the training, how the academic institutions are going to put up the curriculums that are going to ensure that the industry folks receive the best expertise that they need in order to make those decisions based on the big data that generate. So data science is a confluence of many fields. We've talked about mathematics, we've talked about statistics. So we need mathematical, statistical skills to be able to be a good data scientist. But also you need computing skills to be a good data scientist. And not only that, you have to have what's called domain knowledge. If I'm going to be working in the banking industry, I need to understand at least the basics of financial data, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to even do a simple model for this data. So in my opinion, I think that data science really is a program that should be at the graduate level. It's based on the skills that are needed. It is not sufficient to do a data science program at the undergraduate level. And that is because if I even look at statistics, you know, I mean, as Prof. Manda said, Bayesian statistics is certainly taught in undergraduate curriculum, is a graduate course. And so a data science program will have Bayesian statistics as part of it, okay? And right now, you know, we are talking about machine learning, okay? And some of these techniques, you know, support vector machines and random forests and all that, they actually, if you look at the mathematical background behind them, you need a lot of skills. In fact, even you need some topological knowledge. You need a lot of high, you know, advanced algebra to be able to understand how those mappings can take place. So I think just to answer that question and without much ado, I would one, I don't think that we are as now, you know, we need really to develop good curricula that will train good data scientists, because data science is really big. I mean, this is not a straight line. It's a conglomeration of several disciplines. It's multidisciplinary, and so we need to structure our programs with that in mind. Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much, Professor Mandrik.
Yeah, I agree with what my colleague said. I mean, if you want to become a data scientist, I think either you can come from a mathematics, statistics department, and you acquire the necessary computer skills. Now, many of them in mathematics know already can be used. They can easily make the step to Python, but they must add software engineering skills. By the way, also many engineers know a lot about mathematical programming, but they could benefit from software engineering because they cannot maintain the programs. They even don't know that a function exists, making abstraction, etc. Or you come from the computer science department, then you have more than enough skills in computation, but you need to acquire the necessary mathematical background. But I think that it's much more difficult. So if I advise someone that asks me, I want to become a data scientist, what do you do? I say, follow applied mathematics, make sure that you have some programming skills, and then you can make the step easier, because to acquire the necessary computer skills is easier. Yeah.
Thanks, Prof. I see Dr. Chege. I'll give Dr. Chege a chance, then I'll give each of the panelists just a parting shot, 1 minute comment as we close this session.
I just wanted to add to that. And I'm going to use a practical example of something we faced at work the last 2 months. We had 2 open positions, one for lack of a better word, we call it a research engineer, and the other one was for a software engineer. It was quite easy for, if I may use the words, to get someone for the software engineering component, because in that case, you really need someone who is really good at coding, using those OOP structures, knowledge and documentation, everything that Shelby has mentioned about. But the challenge came for the research engineer, because now you want someone who is good with coding, Python, R, okay, those are sort of the main ones that we were looking for. And also someone who understands why these machine learning models work. Because again, you don't want someone who just plugs in the model and spits out some output, but to have that discussion about what are the numbers telling the person, because it requires someone to have an understanding of what is the model doing behind this. And the challenge we faced, and I want to mention this now because of the Professor Amanda's question about the curriculums, because we noticed people who are coming from computer science background, they are really struggling. And partially because of lack of a solid math training in the undergraduate programs, because we were looking for sort of like a beginner entry position, right? So it was a bit of a challenge to get someone from a comp science background who was able to understand why some of the machine learning models that we had in mind work, right? Then the other challenge on the other side was someone who understands the math, being able to do at least some basic, some good, or to be able to write up some code that looks nice and, it's maintainable, it has some nice documentation that, it's well written. And so that was a huge, huge challenge that we faced at that particular point. So I just wanted to emphasize or to highlight that challenge that exists in terms of the curriculums. For comp science background, you realize those who are coming from that world, they have a shortcoming when it comes to the math knowledge. Then the people coming from the math background, they have a challenge now dealing with the computational coding skills. So that was really a challenge, a practical one that we've encountered the last 2 months.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my panel for this, but I want them to give us parting shots. And we've been looking at the theme of this conference, which is advancing research and education in mathematical sciences within the era of big data. So it's important for us to be cognizant of developments, advances, changing times in the way things are done, in the way we develop curriculum, the way we do our business, even as we remain faithful to the core business of mathematics. So I'm going to give Professor Omolo, if you can go first, and just give us your parting thoughts as we go around with the other panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Chair. I just want to say 2 things. With regard to the theme of this conference, which is advancing mathematical research in the area of big data and data science. I think that the mathematical sciences programs are now going to have to adopt to what is trending in both in the scientific field, which is application of data science techniques in understanding data that is out there. Now, one of the things that people do in the mathematical sciences in terms of research is develop new methods, and these are statistical methods by and large. And I think that it is important for us now to embrace the big data era by trying to integrate the traditional statistical methods or new methods that we may develop from statistics with the machine learning and deep learning or artificial intelligence techniques there, so that we can improve on the way that we analyze and understand data for decision making. So the parting shot that I want to give is that, yes, statistics has done a good job over the years, and that is very good. And now, because we are having these huge amounts of data from various fields, we now need to look into how we can integrate the methods that we have in statistics with the methods in artificial intelligence, so that we make better decisions, so that we do better analysis of the data for decision making. And I think that is very, very important. And I can see, there's a lot of activity in this field. A lot of professors now are training, in machine learning techniques and trying to, even compare the statistical methods of classification, especially with the way that machine learning methods are doing the same thing. And then they're seeing that if you integrate statistical and machine learning methods in classification, for instance, you actually get a more accurate classifications, better accuracies, better ROCs, and so on and so forth. So this is, to me, the way to go. Integrate machine learning methods with the traditional statistical methods and come up with a better toolkit of methodologies for understanding data in this area.
Thank you, Professor Molo. I would like to give Professor Mandarik a chance.
Okay, I would like to say a word about how to advance research in this area. And I think there's only one way: you just do it. So, yeah. I mean, you don't learn to cook by buying a lot of books with many recipes. You have to try them out. But also then you need feedback from either your peer students and the people you are working with. Otherwise, you make the same mistake again and again. But I think there's only one way to advance research. You have to do it. And I like a quote of Einstein, Albert Einstein, everyone knows very much. If we knew what we were doing, then it would be research, would it? So just jump in the water and try to swim and reach the other side. But make sure that you have an environment where people, if they try to do something, they get feedback so that they can improve.
Thanks, Prof. Dr. Shelby.
Thank you, Professor Chia. So I'm going to follow up on what Professor Mandrick said, just do it. However, with research, it needs to be funded in industry partners. So we're trying to get industry partners to help us advance our research for the Masters of Data Science program. And let's see, a parting shot. One of the good ways to help prepare students better, make sure computer scientists have a deeper mathematics background, is put it in an engineering context. So engineers have to have a very strong and deep mathematics background. My first degree was actually computer engineering. So way too many calculuses, had to do engineering, physics, linear algebra, statistics, and all this stuff. I hated it, but I was good at it. And as I have progressed through my master's and then my bachelor and my PhD, it didn't matter what I was thrown into, because I had a deep mathematics background and understood general software engineering well. I was able to do well in all my research and all my work. So I'm glad we have what we call it School of Computing and Engineering Sciences now. And we'll try to make sure we have a deeper mathematics background for people who are pursuing computer science.
Thank you. Dr. Shege, you're parting short.
Well, it will be back to what I'd mentioned earlier about having a learning mindset, because the reality is tech is changing. Like you mentioned earlier, you're struggling to even work with your computer. And it's not just even for the students, but I think even for the experienced faculties and experienced researchers, working in industry. We just have to embrace this learning mindset, growth mindset, because there will always be something new that you need to pick up on the way. And the challenge has been and was, I mean, I was trained as a math finance person. Why should I branch off? But you see, having the attitude of, I need to learn an additional skill. I need to learn something new. And I think that's what is going to make us better at research, better as a data scientist, better as a machine learning engineer or software engineer, whatever it is, having that attitude to learn. And with that comes the ability to endure hardship. Because just like in research, I remember during my PhD days, there would be 3 months I'm going to the university almost every single day. And after 3 months, I have nothing to show for it. But, you just can't stop. You just keep plowing away until, someday things click. And I would say this is part of the growth mindset, part of the learning mindset, that we just have to keep plowing away, keep desiring to learn something new, keep learning to be the better version of ourselves by the end of the year. So that's what I would call my part in short for the day.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the organizers of this conference, I want to thank the panelists for very, very insightful and very, very useful ideas that I believe will help us improve, advance, and develop the areas of mathematics in Kenya and beyond. As they've said, it is very competitive. Techniques are changing. You can never use the coding theory anymore, theory for computing the mean anymore. Things have really, really changed, and we need to embrace change, but get grounded in our own content or subject discipline matter. So thank you so much. I am sure there is discussion online, and I look forward to engaging beyond this forum in discussions concerning how to develop mathematics in this era. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your patience, and we want to apologize that we took longer than anticipated. We had planned to finish by 11, but we have surpassed this by 1 hour. So I want to thank you, all of you again, and we want to appreciate, for those who have been keeping with us until this time, I want us to appreciate the panelists and our moderator for doing a good job in helping and understanding more about machine learning and the traditional methods of statistics. Please, let's appreciate them. Thank you so much, and you're welcome to join the other team. So as we proceed, I would just want to let you know that we would like to take few questions, and we limit this to 3. If you have any questions or feedback, especially online or even through the physical meetings, please, let's have your questions. Let's have your questions. We can take a maximum of 3. Any question from the physical meeting here at SBS Auditorium? Any questions online? Okay, I think because of time, we will have to cut this session short. And the next steps from here is that we'll have to break for lunch, but then again, rejoin again for the plenary session, which takes place at 2 p.m. And the plenary session will be accessed through the webinar link, which has been which is the same link that we have used for this session for those joining us online. So we are using that same webinar link. Okay, please join us, and we'll be very happy to learn more about the theme for this mathematical conference. Before we leave, also, I would like to ask the people attending physically for us to take one photo that we can always show that this event really happened. So we can meet outside the auditorium, just outside there. We can take one photo to show that this event really took place. Thank you again for joining online and also for joining physically. I wish to say that we have come to the end of this officially launching the mathematical conference. So thank you again for coming, and thank you again even as we continue with the conference in the next days. Please remember we are joining in the afternoon, as I said, using the webinar link. Okay.